Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to my set review for Phyrexia All Will Be One. We are continuing with the green cards here. Since the last time I recorded, I was made aware that there is one card in each color and potentially some other cards that are not actually in the set boosters that are, or in the draft boosters that are included in the Scryfall search I was doing. So there, I don't think any of those cards, I did go back and check which ones they were, were significant in my assessment. Some of them were quite good, but yeah, I don't think they're gonna, you know, it's one card per color, so it's not like it makes a lot of sense to go back and redo all the previous videos, so we're going to just truck on knowing what we know, and I have excluded them for these next two videos, so you're all aware. Yeah, so we are moving into green cards now. This is not going to be my first look at these cards, so I do have like some idea of what's going on in the set beyond that. So I think we'll just get started with this and get moving. So first off, we have, I've said that word way too many times, but we have Evolving Adaptive. This is a 1 mana 0/0 Phyrexian warrior. Evolving Adaptive enters the battlefield with an oil counter on it. Evolving Adaptive gets +1/+1 for each oil counter on it. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, if that creature has greater power or toughness than Evolving Adaptive, put an oil counter on Evolving Adaptive. This is a Pelt Collector Experiment 1 Evolve style creature. But more than that, this will play very nicely in red-green oil strategies, like aggressive oil strategies. That 1 mana trick from red gives this thing +4/+4 with 2 of it sticking around. So that's like sweet, like super sweet, just a crazy trick. And I don't think it's going to be too hard to get like an evolve trigger or two on this. Pelt Collector was a rare, but did get trample. And Experiment 1 had a little bit more resilience than this thing does, so I'm not sure that it's gonna like carry in the way that those cards maybe did. But this is definitely like a really solid card in my opinion. If you can get the oil synergies and just grease it up. Particularly in like a red-green aggressive strategy, this is going to be nuts. That 1 mana artifact that puts an oil counter on something every combat, I think it is combat, is going to be crazy good with this card. Next, so I like this card a lot. Next up, we have Green Sun's Twilight. This is a 1 and X. This is the green version of, or the green card in the Sun's Twilight cycle. This is a sorcery. Reveal the top X+1 cards of your library. Choose a creature card and or a land card from among them. Put those cards into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. If X is 5 or more, instead put the chosen cards onto the battlefield or into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Corrected company. And I did say corrected. It doesn't hit 2 things, but, well, it does hit 2 things. It hits a creature and a land at sorcery speed. this is like okay. If you can do it for 5, you know, you're very unlikely to whiff, but you can whiff, like you can miss creatures. Definitely not constructed playable. Like 6 mana to get the good effect is not getting there in constructed. I don't think that the Twilight cycle is actually constructed playable at all. But yeah, I guess if you could generate ridiculous amounts of mana in like an Amulet Titan style deck, but I don't even know if that's worth it there, because you can just whiff, right? You can just whiff, and or you could have gone and gotten a Primeval Titan with something like a Summoner's Pact and been totally okay with that. Next up, we have Incubation Sac. This is a 1 mana artifact. Enters the battlefield with 3 oil counters on it. Pay 4, tap it, remove an oil counter from it. Create a 3/3 colorless Phyrexian Golem artifact creature token. Activate only as a sorcery. I think this is too slow. I think this card is very nice for like a slower strategy where you're like maybe proliferating those counters to get the 3/3 every turn forever. But at 4 mana, on top of having the artifact in play and then having to like, I think it's just too slow, right? And too expensive. If this was not as vulnerable or as slow as it is, no, I mean, if it could be, this could cost, you know, like 2 and tap, and it would be fine, right? The fact that it costs 4 and tap, it means that this is just way too slow. It's not like you're going to be able to get your play alongside this 3/3. You're going to spend most of your turn making a 3/3, and then maybe you'll play like a 1-drop alongside it, or a 2-drop alongside it. Maybe a removal spell. Yeah. Just too slow. Next up, we have Rustvine Cultivator. This is a 1 mana, 1/2 Phyrexian Elf Druid. Tap, put an oil counter on it. Tap, remove an oil counter from it. Untap target land. This is a slow Llanowar Elves, unless you're playing red-green, in which case you can like put the oil counters on it from somewhere else and just use it as mana instead. Or like you swing with it once, play the trick on it, and then it's a mana dork from then on out. For 2 turns, I guess, but still. Yeah, so it seems reasonable. 1/2 is a solid stat line. Like, you can play this to get your first trigger on your evolving adaptives, so that's nice. But it's not going to accelerate you in the way that like a Llanowar Elves would. And if you're choked on mana, your opponent can like very much see this coming and punish it really hard. It's a decent card, right? Don't get me wrong, because nobody wants to spend the removal on a mana dork. It's just sometimes the correct thing to do. So yeah, I mean, this is a decent card. It's decent. You can put it in your deck and not be upset about it. These two, be upset about. Maybe not the Twilight Unlimited, but probably. Next up, we have Thirsting Roots. This is a 1 mana sorcery. Choose one. Search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. Or proliferate. Traditionally, like, these cards that are like fixing early and then, you know, not a horrid top deck are pretty okay. That said, like, the one we had last time was Bushwhack, and that was pretty good because it was actually a removal spell on the other side. This is just a proliferate, which is like, it's decent. But it's not crazy. I think, again, this is sort of in the same camp as the Rustvine Cultivator. I mean, I would say, like, it's not a card you're unhappy to run, but you don't want to be running more than one of these. But it's not a card you're unhappy to be running. Next up, we have Tyvar's Stand. This is a X and a green instant. Target creature you control gains +X/+X, gains hexproof and indestructible until the end of turn. This card is ridiculous. Ridiculous. This is a trick. This is a protection spell. This is Tamiyo's Safekeeping plus. And Tamiyo's Safekeeping was pretty good. And this is ridiculous. Opponent tries to remove your creature. Tyvar's Stand. Good game. I mean, whatever they're trying to do is not happening. I think more often than not, though, this is kind of going to be a defensive... this is better used defensively, because if your opponent isn't trying to remove the creature ahead of time, they can, again, get underneath it with a removal spell, which means that your Tyvar's Stand, I mean, you got 2 for 1, but on top of that, like, it was a spell that could have potentially fogged your opponent's attack, and it was a protection spell that was really, really good. Next up, we have a Venerated Rot Priest. This is a 1 mana, 1/2 Phyrexian Druid with Toxic 1, and whenever a creature you control becomes the target of a spell, target opponent gets a poison counter. This is any spell. That's nice. This card is good. This card is traditional Infect. Good. This card might actually even make it in Infect. In, like, Modern. Because, like, there you're trying to pump up your creature and all that nonsense, and so you're using a bunch of pump spells, like Mutagenic Growths for 2 life, and now, you know, that just comes along with, oh, you get a poison counter. You know, your opponent gets a poison counter as well. Whee! Now it takes even less to kill them with a Rock Priest in play. I don't know if it's significantly less. And this, notably having Toxic instead of Infect, means that your scale-ups and stuff are not as efficient for giving this additional for getting additional Infect on your opponent with this specifically. But yeah, this card's gonna be sick, and it's gonna be probably pretty sick in limited too. Just this card will get poison kills. Just because people aren't gonna be like, they'll spend a removal spell on one of your other creatures, and like you'll be like, oh, Rock Priest trigger, and they'll go, oh, You're gonna have those moments. You are gonna have those moments. Yeah, I think this card is very good. And it's a 1/2. Because why is this a 1/2? This is like a good ability, like a very solid ability on the creature. And then it's got an above the curve stat line too. That's crazy. It's crazy. Next up we have Armored Scrap Gorger. This is the first 2-drop in green. So green has quite a few less 1-drops than some of the other colors. I say quite a few, it may just be one less. But this is a 2-mana, 0/3 Phyrexian Beast. Scrap Gorger gets +3/+0 as long as it has 3 or more oil counters on it. Tap, add 1 mana of any color. Whenever Armored Scrap Gorger becomes tapped, exile target card from a graveyard and put an oil counter on Armored Scrap Gorger. So, I like this card a lot. This, you know, you can just, like, you can leave it back as, like, an unlicensed hearse style effect, because you can just tap it to add a mana and eat a card out of a graveyard. You can, you know, attack with it. This is actually kind of, you know, kind of a cool thing. You know, when this has 2 oil counters on it, even though it's a 0/3, you can just attack with it. It'll tap and get this trigger. Important to note that you do need a target for it, though, to get an oil counter. If there are no cards in graveyards, it will not get an oil counter because they didn't use the nice new up to wording. It's not that new in terms of wording. It's just, you know, sort of new to me. Not new to me. What am I trying to say? Newer, shall we say. But this card is very versatile. I think this is potentially constructed playable, at least in Standard, maybe Explorer. Maybe there's something that can make this work in Explorer. Maybe as a sideboard card in like a Gruul deck, something like that. Just to have that nice little bit of graveyard hate alongside a decent, like, Monodork aggressive body thing. I don't know that the shell exists for it now, but I definitely could see this seeing some sideboard play as a, you know, particularly as a budget option for people who can't afford an unlicensed hearse, which is typically better, I think, but this could play a role. Next up, we have Branch Blight Stalker. This is a 2-mana, 3/1 Phyrexian Elf Scout with Toxic 2, and that's it. Just, yeah, this is not exciting at all. Yeah, it's just not good. You will, like, it's like the Ward 2 thing from from the last set. It's not good enough, but if you absolutely have to have curve filler, this is it, right? Next up, we have Cankerbloom. This is a 2-mana, 3/2 Phyrexian Fungus. Pay 1, sacrifice Cankerbloom, choose 1, destroy target artifact, destroy target enchantment, proliferate. Good card. Solid card. Aggressive body, and then, like, just an activated ability that is utility if you need it. If your opponent has a giant artifact or something, you can pop this to destroy it. If they have a, you know, if the proliferate is going to give them the last poison counter, you can pop this and give them the last poison counter. Just nice versatility there. You can also just, like, pop it to proliferate a bunch of counters onto your, like, attackers. And like an evolving adaptive, pump it up, surprise pump, whatever. Very nice card. Next up we have Copper Longlegs. This is a 2 mana, 1/3 Phyrexian Spider, reach, 1 and a green, sacrifice Copper Longlegs, proliferate. This is a spider. This will probably it's a nice blocker against like the blue-white flying circus. It is only a 1/3, so it's probably not gonna be great against them for very long. Yeah, maybe it's not that good. Maybe it's not that good. It is a common, so you'll see him. Decent blocker. Nice ability in the late game. But this is really not going to be played in an aggressive like oil deck, so the proliferate is going to be more about getting counters on your bigger, badder stuff. Yeah. Next up, we have Infectious Bite. This is a 2 mana instant. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. Each opponent gets a poison counter. This is a punch. Whap. On curve, gives a poison counter. Very nice in an aggressive Gruul deck or like a mid-range green deck. Yeah, just a solid card. And it's not a fight, so that's quite good. Next up, we have Predation Steward. This is a 2 mana, 2/2 creature, Phyrexian Elf Warrior. Predation Steward enters the battlefield with 2 oil counters on it. Pay 3, tap it, remove an oil counter from it. Target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Activate only as a sorcery. Okay. They put way too many limiters on this activated ability. This is a grizzly bear, more or less. The pump could be used to try to push through some damage, but man, that is a taxed ability. Like no tricks with it, only as a sorcery, so you've got to pump your thing before you go to combat. If it gets removed, you've tapped down your defenses and lost your attacker. And it's 3 mana, so you've spent your turn as well. So I don't know about this one. I really am not sold on this one. This one seems pretty weak. It's usable, so you can play it, but you're not going to be happy about it. Next up, we have Ruthless Predation. This is a 2 mana sorcery. Target creature you control gets +1/+2 until end of turn. It fights target creature you don't control. We saw a card very much like this in the last set. Solid card. +1/+2 is pretty meaningful, actually. It means your 2/2 now eats their 3/3 instead of trading for it if it was +1/+1. Yeah, just a nice card. Nice card. Next up, we have Titanic Growth. This is 1 and a green instant. Target creature gets +4/+4 until end of turn. Typically, tricks like this, where it's just a big stat boost, like the way tricks work is the bigger the difference, the less. The more obvious it is. The bigger the stats difference that you're willing to swing, the more obvious it is, like, what trick you have. Because, like, if you're willing to swing a 1/1 into their 4/4, they're like, oh, they have Titanic Growth. If you're willing to swing, like a 2/2 or a 3/3, they don't necessarily know. Particularly if you're swinging alongside other stuff. Right? So it's just very easy to play around bigger tricks. by knowing they have it. Now, you know, if you just want to go face and hit damage, that's, you know, this is a good card. I don't particularly care for just stat buff tricks. Like, they're decent. They can be decent, but I generally prefer to run other cards like fight spells, removal spells, instead of combat tricks, because you have to work to make your combat trick into a removal spell, and you have to same thing for like making it a burn spell. It's like the weakest of all the instant speed interaction. Like, if you're trying to use it as a removal spell, your opponent can just like not block. If you're trying to use it as a burn spell, your opponent can just block. Right? Yeah. It's a solid trick. You know, we've seen it before, but I don't particularly care for tricks like that. Next up, we have Unnatural Restoration. This is a 2-mana sorcery. Return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. Proliferate. Okay. Good card. Like a regrowth style effect. I don't know if regrowth just gets permanents or not, but that style of effect is usually pretty solid in draft. A lot of your bombs are creatures, particularly in this set. It seems like a lot of the bombs are creatures or permanents of some description. Proliferate tacked on there is pretty nice, but just the regrowth alone is usually good enough. Right? Just get back that one really good card that they dealt with, or that you milled for some reason. Next up, we have Adaptive Sporesinger. This is a 3-mana, 2/2 Phyrexian Druid, Vigilance. When it enters the battlefield, choose one. Target creature gets +2/+2 and gains Vigilance until end of turn, or Proliferate. This is actually solid. This is a solid card. It comes in, a lot of times you're going to be choosing that first ability, which is going to just get through some damage and leave you well defended, because your creature didn't have to tap down to attack this turn, and you're getting this 2/2. That's pretty solid. And then Proliferate, if you have your opponent at a high poison total or something like that, this will, you know, help push you over the edge. I like this card. It's a decent card. Not much more to say about it but that. Next up, we have Bloated Contaminator. This is a 3-mana, 4/4 Phyrexian Beast. Okay, we can move on now. This is ridiculous. It has Trample, Toxic 1, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, Proliferate. Okie dokie. Yeah. Scoop. Just, no. No. This is an effective Toxic 2, because the combat damage trigger is always going to happen after the Toxic. Trample. A 4/4 for Trample, 4/4 with Trample for 3. Cool. It's not even like double green, triple green. No, this card is bonkers. Just absolutely bonkers. Get out of here. Get out of here, green. Why do you get some stupid stuff? Oh my god. Next up, we have Carnivorous Canopy. This is a 3-mana sorcery. Destroy target artifact, enchantment, or creature with flying. If that permanent's mana value is 3 or less, Proliferate. Okay. This is kind of an artifact set. Kill stuff with flying. There's a fair bit of flying. Decent card. If it kills little stuff, you get to Proliferate. Nice. I wouldn't count on that. I would just play this as the removal spell and then be like, okay, if I get the Proliferate, that's very nice. So yeah, solid card. Next up, we have Contagious Vorak. This is a 3-mana, 3/3 Phyrexian Boar Beast. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a land card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. If you didn't put a card into your hand this way, Proliferate. Yeah, that's solid. solid card. Typically, you will be hitting land in the top 4. But there's the hidden mode of, you know, you can just choose not to take the land if the proliferate is better for you. So yeah, solid card. 3 mana, 3/3. Good. Now, obviously, it's nothing in comparison to this 3 mana 4/4 that we just saw, but this is where I would expect things to land. I mean, oh my gosh. This is a solid card. I like it. You could probably take like a billion of these things and be happy. Next up, we have Ickerspit Basilisk. This is a 3 mana, 1/3 Phyrexian Basilisk with Death Touch and Toxic 1. This is decent. Nothing really to write home about, but it's decent. Nice for getting corrupted on your opponents. That does not seem to be a theme that's super heavy in green. But it is something that you can keep in mind in case you are running, like, well, obviously you're probably going to be running green X if you're looking at running this, and if your other color has some things that care about corrupted, this can be a nice way to enable that, because your opponent is going to have to either trade with it or take the poison and turn on your corrupted stuff, which is, you know, hopefully, and most of the time this is going to trade up, right? Not a lot that costs less than 3 has enough power to really challenge this. Next up, we have Maze's Mantle. This is a 3 mana enchantment aura. It has Flash, enchant creature. When it enters the battlefield, if enchanted creature has Toxic, that creature gains hexproof until end of turn. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2. Wow. This is a nice little payoff for Toxic decks. I don't like that it is a shield for toxic creatures when it's just nothing for non-toxics. You really are, like, the only place you really want to be playing this is on a toxic creature as a protection spell. Other than that, it's just a persistent trick. Maybe that's good enough. Maybe. It's okay. It's an alright card. I'm not a huge fan, but it's alright. Next up, we have Viral Spawning. This is a 3 mana sorcery. Create a 3/3 green Phyrexian Beast creature token with Toxic 1. Corrupted. As long as an opponent has 3 or more poison counters and Viral Spawning is in your graveyard, it has Flashback 3. With 2 and a green, but 3. Okay, so this is a 3 mana, 3/3 creature that, if your opponent is corrupted, you just get another 3 mana, 3/3 creature. In the future. Again, this is like a nice... This is actually a pretty solid aggressive card. Like, the flashback being the same as the mana cost is very nice. Next up, we have Conduit of Worlds. This is a 4 mana artifact, double green. You may play land cards from your graveyard. Tap. Choose target non-land permanent card in your graveyard. If you haven't cast a spell this turn, you may cast that card. If you do, you can't cast additional spells this turn. Activate only as a sorcery. This is a very slow, grindy card. Very slow and grindy. If you can live through playing this, it probably is going to win you the game. That second, like, it looks... That activated ability looks debilitating to activate. But the reality of the situation is, if you have something else to do, if you have another card in your hand or something like that, you'll just do that. It just says you can't double spell when you play something out of the graveyard. But you're already generating effective card advantage by getting cards out of your bin. So this card is very good if you can survive playing it. If the format is slow enough or you have enough defense, this card can, just put away the game. Recurring whatever, and it doesn't get rid of the card afterwards unless I miss something. Right? The card, yeah, if you play, now it is only permanence, so, but if you play a creature, you block with that creature, it dies, it doesn't go away forever, you can just get it out of your graveyard again. This is very nice. If you can survive playing it, because it as a 4-mana artifact that doesn't do anything on its face besides let you play lands, this is pretty slow. And pretty dangerous to play. Next up we have Evolved Spinoderm. This is a 4-mana, 5/5 Phyrexian beast. Enters the battlefield with 4 oil counters on it. Has trample as long as it has 2 or fewer oil counters on it. Otherwise, it has hexproof. At the beginning of your upkeep, remove an oil counter from it. Then if it has no oil counters on it, sacrifice it. This is definitely like the top end of an oil aggro deck. It's kind of in a position where you want it to be at that 2 or fewer oil counters spot. This is actually one that works poorly with that with the 1-mana red trick, because if it has a single oil counter on it, and it works nicely and poorly. Okay, so if it's attacking and it's hitting something and it has a single oil counter on it, it is a 5/5 with trample. If you play that trick on it, it becomes a 7/7 with hexproof. It loses the trample, gains hexproof. All of a sudden your damage isn't going through. That said, you can also just like instant speed put the oil counters on it to protect it, so that's quite nice. I think this card is really good. It's just worth noting that trick is maybe a little bit worse with this than you might think. Next up, we have Expand the Sphere. This is a 4-mana sorcery. Look at the top 6 cards of your library. Put up to 2 land cards from among them onto the battlefield tapped, then the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. If you put fewer than 2 lands onto the battlefield this way, proliferate a number of times equal to the difference. Garbage. This is like explosive, like an explosive vegetation or a Skyshroud Claim that can whiff. The whiffs do get you proliferates, but that's not really worth... Proliferate twice is... I don't think it's worth 4 mana. That's all I have to say about that. Like, yes, this can do things. Like, it can kill your opponent if they're at high poison. But then again, like, you could just, like, get through with something else. And if they're at high poison... I'm sure you have better things to do, is all I'm saying. Next up, we have Lattice Blade Mantis. This is a 4-mana, 4/3 Phyrexian insect. Whenever Lattice Blade Mantis enters the battlefield with 2 oil counters on it, no, it just enters the battlefield with 2 oil counters on it. And whenever this attacks, you may remove an oil counter from it. If you do untap it, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So this is an effective 5/4 Vigilance for 2 turns for 4. This is a solid card. And again, in an oil-based deck where you can put additional oil counters on it, being able to continue to beat down at that level is quite nice. Now, it is not a 5/4 on the defensive. It is only a 4/3. It does die to lightning bolt style effects, like the one we saw in red. So that is important to know, that it can trade down for red removal. But I think this is a solid card. I think it's a very nice, aggressive beater. So next up we have Plague Nurse. This is a 4 mana, 3/4, Phyrexian Cleric, Toxic 2, with 2 and a green. No tap symbol here. Each other creature you control with Toxic gains Toxic 1 until end of turn. Activate only once each turn. That's quite nice. That'll kill people. Yeah, this card's gonna kill people. This is gonna be played in like a green-white aggressive deck more so than anything else. Just because giving your mites effective Toxic 2 is solid. Yeah. So this is a nice card. 3/4 for 4, also solid stat line. Next up, we have Venomous Brutalizer. This is a 4 mana, 4/4 Phyrexian Knight with Toxic 3. That's a big toxic number. Whenever a Venomous Brutalizer enters the battlefield, you may pay 1 and a green. If you do, proliferate. So you can play it as a 6 mana 4/4 with Toxic 3 and proliferate. Yeah, I think this card is good. Like a 4/4 for 4, solid stats. Toxic 3, big toxic number. I'd like to see some sort of other ability on it. You're going to have to put in work to actually get that Toxic 3 to connect. But it's going to kill people quite quickly. Toxic 3. And then, you know, if you get to the late game and you have 6 mana and you top deck this, it's not bad to have that extra proliferate value. That's nice. So, quite nice. Next up, we have Noxious Assault. This is a 5 mana sorcery. Creatures you control get +2/+2 until end of turn. Whenever a creature blocks this turn, its controller gets a poison counter. This is gonna kill people. This is a death overrun. This is a lethal overrun almost all the time. Right? If you have a couple of toxic creatures, it's a horrible time for your opponent. This is gonna just murder people. I cannot stress enough that this will murder people. You know, if you're gonna go wide deck, this is ridiculously powerful. Like a go wide green white deck is gonna love this card. Yeah. Next up, we have Oil Gorger Troll. This is a 5 mana 3/4 Phyrexian Troll Warrior. When Oil Gorger Troll enters the battlefield, you gain 3 life. Then, if you control a permanent with an oil counter on it, draw a card. Okay, so this is like a more slow. This is a slower card for an oil deck, a slower, more value-y card for an oil deck. Still a pretty solid card. Like enters the battlefield, gain 3 life, and then potentially draw a card is great. So. Yeah, this card is good. But you don't want to, like, it's the kind of card you don't really want to be playing in your aggressive deck because its stat line's below the curve and its abilities are more defensively focused than anything, more value focused than anything. So that's sort of maybe the place where it falls into an awkward position. But it's a good card. Like, it's a good card. Draw cards. Very good. Next up, we have Thrun, Breaker of Silence. This is a 5 mana, 5/5 legendary creature troll shaman. This spell can't be countered. Trample. Thrun, the Breaker of Silence, can't be the target of non-green spells your opponents control or abilities from non-green sources your opponents control. As long as it's your turn, Thrun has indestructible. A+. Really good #1 card. Not #1 from the set, but just a really solid card. 5 mana, 5/5. Indestructible. Effectively hexproof. right? Unless you're playing a green mirror, in which case it's not hexproof, but it's a 5/5. So like your opponent has to have a decent sized creature to fight it with or punch it with anyway. So that makes this sort of fine. Next up, we have Tyrannak's Atrocity. This is a 5 mana, 4/4, haste, toxic 3. It's a Phyrexian dinosaur. So I like this card considerably less than the 4 mana, 4/4, toxic 3 knight that we saw earlier. Haste, good ability, but a subpar stat line and no trample on this. Just make it that much less appealing. Like it's attacking the same turn as the 4 mana one. But it's 1 mana more. There is a little bit of surprise factor here. I don't think it's enough to justify this card being good, right? It's too small at this mana value. Next up, we have Scythe Engulfer. This is a 6 mana, 6/5 Phyrexian beast with reach and trample. Scythe Engulfer can't be blocked by creatures with flying. 6 mana, 6/5. Very nice stat line. Very nice card. Can't be blocked by creatures with flying, so it's got some minor evasion. It has trample, so it has an additional level of like pseudo evasion, and then it has reach. So if you're in a defensive position, this is still a good card. Yeah, solid card, solid common. Next up, we have Sylvok Battle Chair. This is a 6 mana artifact equipment for Mirrodin. Equipped creature gets +4/+4 and has trample. Equip 7. So, yeah, just why? It is a 6 mana, 6/6 with trample that leaves behind some ungodly, like, barely equipable equipment. Granted, if you play it in draft, you're probably going to be able to equip it later, so you can just run the 2/2 token into, whatever defenses they have, and then throw this onto a better creature after that. I think this will be a solid card if you can get to it in the late game. I think this will end games, but that equipability is prohibitive. And I wonder why they did that with all these equipments. This one is at least like its effect is sort of justified, sort of justifies a higher cost. Maybe not that high though. It's also in green, which is just like not an equipment color. Next up, we have Nissa, Ascended Animist. This is a 7 mana legendary planeswalker. It's Nissa. That is notably 2 Phyrexian. It has completed, so if you pay for its Phyrexian mana costs, it enters with 2 fewer loyalty for each time you paid with life. So, you can play this as a 5 mana planeswalker with 3 loyalty, a 6 mana planeswalker with 5 loyalty, or a 7 mana planeswalker with 7 loyalty. This comes down on, if this comes down on turn 5, and then, yeah, okay. So I'm going to talk about its abilities real quick. go over those. This is a +1. Create an XX green Phyrexian horror creature token where X is Nissa send an Animist's loyalty. Importantly, the plus is the cost, and therefore happens before the effect pops. So the creature will be 1 larger than what her loyalty was when you activated the ability. So if she comes down on turn 5 as a 3 loyalty planeswalker, she will be making a 4/4. -1, destroy target artifact or enchantment. Quite nice. -7, until end of current turn, creatures you control get +1/+1 for each forest you control and gain trample. Okay. This is a very good planeswalker. The +1 protects itself, the -1 is a sort of removal, and the -7, aka the ultimate, is an ultimate. It may win you the game immediately. I think the value of the first 2 abilities is going to be generally higher than... It's generally just going to be worth playing this at, like, 5. Even though it's coming down with a lot fewer loyalty counters, just because the creature it generates every turn is going to be a sizable creature, and, like, the minus ability can be used. So it'll come down, it'll make a 4/4. Next turn it'll make a 5/5, or next turn it'll destroy an artifact or enchantment, or next turn, you know, well, those are the 2 options, really. Maybe a smaller creature because they got hit, but that's about it. Very solid card. Obviously, mythic, ridiculous. Next up we have Paladin of Predation. This is a 7 mana, 6/7 Phyrexian Knight. Toxic 6. I'm sorry. Did you mean to say a lethal? If your opponent doesn't have 4 poison counters by turn 7 in this format, I don't know what's happened. I guess you were playing like a deck that wasn't trying to kill with poison? But even still, like, the toxic creatures don't only do infect damage, so I would doubt that there would be none in your deck. Maybe your opponent was blocking them more aggressively than your other creatures, but yeah, this is gonna, you know, this kills people in either 1 or 2 attacks. 1 or 2 attacks, they are dead, right? If this gets to attack, you have probably won the game. This is a very good uncommon, like a very good uncommon. And I think that this is even more so indicative that the format is very fast, that they let this thing slide, right? The fact that they let this thing in the format just sort of go indicates to me that this is a format in which they're willing to reward you for going late, like a lot. Because an uncommon that wins the game in an attack is wild. Next up we have Tyrannax Rex. This is a 7 mana, 4, 5, 6, 7, yes. 7 mana, 8/8 Phyrexian Dinosaur. This spell can't be countered. Trample, Ward 4, Haste, Toxic 4. Yup. Dead you is kind of what this card reads. Now, it's interesting that they've got other stuff with hexproof in the set, and then this just has Ward 4, which is effectively hexproof, except it's not exactly. Right? And they also have like pseudo hexproof and Thrun. They have actual hexproof on this thing and they have actual hexproof on Evolved Spinoderm. I guess it's conditional. There's nothing that explicitly just has hexproof. So that's sort of their theory there, is like the hexproof is all conditional of some description. There's always a way to get at the creature. There is another card with hexproof in the set that I know for sure. but they seem to have been willing to push that style of card a lot more. So yeah, this is going to kill people. If you open this, kill people with it. They're going to die. They can't counter it. They can't really block it. They can't really kill it. Yeah, it's going to kill them. They're going to be dead. Next up, we have, last but not least, Zopandrel, Hunger Dominus. This is a 7 mana legendary creature, Phyrexian Horror. It is a 4/6. It has reach at the beginning of each combat. Each combat. Not on your turn. Just each combat. Double the power and toughness of each creature you control until end of turn. So this is an effective 8/12. Nice. Double Phyrexian green. Sacrifice 2 other creatures. Put an indestructible counter on Zopandrel. Yeah, this is a good card. That is a good card. It's like very solid. Green was spiced. Yeah. It does seem a little slower than some of the other colors, but at the same time, like, green is typically able to ramp as well, and we saw some ramp in this. Nothing super early, like the Monodorks. We saw 2 Monodorks early, so that's something, but no, like, land-based ramp until later. But yeah, green's gonna be real good. So as I've concluded most of these other videos, I am just one person, so if you guys have any other ideas about, like, what this set's going to be like, or if there's anything that I missed, feel free to share that in the comments. You know, if there's any sort of synergies that you can think of that are really cool, feel free to post those as well, and I will be back next time with the multicolored cards, colorless cards, and lands. And I hope to see you there. So, catch you next.